Part 2. Limitation of the suits, appeal and application. Section 3 to 11. Section 6 of the Limitation Act 1963 applicable to plaintiffs. Bar of Limitation Act applies to appeal, suit, application. Section 3 of the Limitation Act 1963 does not apply to execution proceeding. It applies to suit, appeal, application for leave to sue as a pauper. Section 5 of the Limitation Act 1963 applies to appeal. Disability for the purpose of Section 6(1) of the Limitation Act 1963 does not mean disability arising because of insolvency. It means minority, insanity, and idiocy. Provision of the condonation of delay on the ground of sufficient clause is dealt with under Section 5 of Limitation Act 1963. A party who pray for condonation of delay under Section 5 of Limitation Act 1963 has to establish that he was vigilant, no negligence is on part, no lack of bona fides on his part. Section 6 of the Limitation Act laid down that where a person entitled to institute a suit etc. at the time from which the prescribed period is to be reckoned, a minor or insane or an idiot, he may institute a suit etc. within the same period after the disability has ceased, as would otherwise have been allowed from the time specified in the schedule. Section 6 does not provide for fresh starting of point of limitation. Section 6 does not prevent running of limitation but only extend to the period of limitation. A time-barred date claimed. None of the above. Condonation of delay under Section 5 of Limitation Act. Sufficient cause for delay has to be shown. The provision of Section 5 of the Act, extension or prescribed period are not applicable to suits. What is the legal disability under the Limitation Act? None of the above. A proceeding filed after prescribed period of limitation is to be dismissed even by the court itself. Select the correct one as the following. No suit shall be admitted after prescribed period of limitation. Under Section 3 of Limitation Act 1963, court is required to consider the question of limitation suo motu even when the defendant has not taken any objection of limitation. Section 5 of Limitation Act is not applicable to the proceeding under Section 34 of Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, and the time limit prescribed under Section 34 is absolutely and unextendable. If any period of limitation is to be excluded from the prescribed period of limitation, the party necessary has to satisfy the appropriate provision in the Section 4 to 24 of the Limitation Act 1963. Provision of Section 3 of Limitation Act 1963 are mandatory. Whether court can dismiss an appeal on ground of Limitation Act, even if limitation is not pleaded as the ground, yes. Where the prescribed period for any suit, appeal, application expiry on a day when the court is closed, the suit, appeal or application may be instituted, preferred or made by the day when court reopens. Counterclaim under Section 3 of Limitation Act 1963 shall be deemed to have been instituted on the day on which counterclaim is made. Assertion. Where any special local law prescribed for any suit, appeal, or application a period of limitation different from period prescribed by schedule, the provision of Section 3 of Limitation Act shall apply as if such period were both period prescribed by the schedule. Reason. Where special law prescribed a period of limitation for filing an appeal, but there is no provision. Therefore, under Limitation Act 1963, the period of limitation provided under special law must be treated a different from under the Limitation Act. Both A and R are true, and R is a correct explanation of A. Assertion. Section 5 of the Limitation Act 1963 empower the court to admit a suit after prescribed period if the plaintiff satisfy the court that he had sufficient cause for not instituting the suit. Even an appeal may be admitted after prescribed period if the appellate shows sufficient cause for not preferring the appeal within the prescribed period. A is true and B is false. For the purpose of Limitation Act 1963, which one of the following claims shall be treated as a separate suit? Set-off and counterclaim. Every suit instituted, appeal preferred, and application made by the prescribed period shall be dismissed, although limitation has not been set up as a defense. Section 5 of the Limitation Act 1963 applies to appeal and application. If a clause of action for the suit arises when the plaintiff is minor, he may institute the suit within the period of prescribed by limitation for such suit after attaining the majority. Where the prescribed period of limitation for any application is expiring on holiday, the application may be made on the day when court reopens. As per Section 5 of Limitation Act 1963, prescribed period of limitation may extend in the case of an application under Order 21 of the CPC. Section 6 of Limitation Act does not apply in the case of poverty. Under Limitation Act, the period of limitation for any suit or application shall be deemed to be extended for maximum period of 3 years from the death of the person affected by disability. Section 5 of Limitation Act 1963 does not apply to suit, execution, petition under Section Order 21 of CPC, petition for divorce under Hindu Marriage Act 1956. Which one of the following is not disability under Section 6, legal disability of the Limitation Act 1963? Insolvency. Supreme Court in Collector Land Acquisition, Antangnang versus Kattiji, 1987, lays down the guiding principle for deciding an application under Section 5 of Limitation Act 1963. Ground of legal disability provided under Section 6 of Limitation Act are minority, insanity, idiocy. For the purpose of Limitation Act, suit is instituted in ordinary case when the plaintiff is presented to the proper officer. In the case of proper, when his application for leave to sue as a proper is made. In the case of claim against a company which is being wound up by the court, when the claimant first send in the claim of the official liquidator. where the prescribed period for suit, appeal, application expiry on a day when the court is closed, the suit, appeal, application may be instituted, preferred by made, on a day when the court reopens. Section 5 of Limitation Act does not apply to suit, where once the time has begun to run, no subsequent disability or inability instituted a suit to make application stop on it under Section 9. In a term of Section 3 of Limitation Act, the court is required to consider the question of limitation suo motu on its own. The provision of Section 3 of the Limitation Act 1963 are mandatory. Section 6 of Limitation Act 1963 can be availed by the plaintiff. Ground of condonation of delay, none of these. Where a person is affected by two legal disability, or where one disability followed up with another without leaving a gap, then suit of application may be filed after both disability have ceased. If a pronote is executed on 5th July 1945, last day for filing the suit will be 6th June 1948. Section 13 of Limitation Act 1963 applies in the case of a pauper. Under Section 6 of Limitation Act, minor include a child in the womb. A counterclaim is treated as a separate suit and is deemed to have been instituted on a day on which the counterclaim is made in the court. Provision of Section 5 of Limitation Act 1963 for extension of prescribed period is applicable to none of these. Whether a court can grant extension period of limitation under Section 5 of the ground of sufficient cause in a case of application under Order 21 of the CPC? No. During period of legal disability, the period of limitation shall remain suspended. Period of limitation is not attracted in the case of suit against trustee. Delay in filing the suit cannot be condoned under Limitation Act 1963. The limitation period expiry on 1/1/2012, but the court has holiday from 30 December 2011 to 5 January 2012. Limitation will be expiry on 6 January 2012. A right to sue occurred to X on 1/1/2000 when he was minor at the age of 15. The period of limitation of 2 years expiry on 1/1/2005. Delay in filing the suit cannot be condoned. This section is based on the principle of lex non coget ad impossibile. Section 4. Right to sue on bond acquired to it during his minority. He attained majority after 4 years from the acquittal of the right of sue. After a year of attaining majority, he became insane. His insanity continued for 3 years. A suit would be time barred even if instituted within the day being cured of insanity. Which provision of the Act stipulated that running of the period of limitation of suit to recover debt where letter of administration of estate creditor have been granted to the debtor would be suspended while the process of administration continued to Section 9. Limitation Act 1963 applies to suit, appeal and application. Any claim by way of set-off or a counter-claim shall be treated as a separate suit. Legal disability means minority, insanity and idiocy. Delay in filing within period prescribed may be condoned by court upon showing of sufficient cause under Section 5 of Limitation Act in the case of appeal. The period of limitation cannot extend under Section 5 of the Limitation Act in the following proceeding. Application filed under subsection 4 of 198 of UP Jamindari Abolition Act and Land Reform Act 1950. Section 5 of Limitation Act applies to appeal and application. Acknowledgement after the expiry of the period prescribed under Indian Limitation Act for a suit of applicant is of no effect. What is the prescribed period for limitation to file a suit for money payable for money lent from date of the loan is made? 3 years. What is the limitation for filing a suit for recovery of areas of land? 3 years from the date of arrears became due.